The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.
Hey, it's Cashflow Mike, and welcome back to another episode of the Clear Path to Cash. And this week we're going to talk about, what was really missing was structure. And what I'm talking about is through this busy season, you're trying to get into advisory, you're kind of struggling back and forth. We're going to make sure that there's structure anyway. So I want to talk through something that came up in a conversation with a member just recently with me, right? So they had a client meeting earlier that day, and something about it stayed with them. And as they were describing it to me, the meeting itself felt fine, right? While it was happening anyway. They were comfortable with their numbers, and the client was tracking with the conversation. Everything seemed to be going well. But when it was over, he just couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't really gone anywhere. So I asked him, what the client was going to do next. What are they going to do next? Well, he didn't have an answer for that. And that's the part that matters, right? See, because a lot of advisors are going to run into this. They're going to explain the situation really well, but the conversation never really turns into a movement. And I experienced that myself with a client recently, right? There's a client that understands more than they ever did before, but they don't leave with a clear decision or an action. And even when you tell them the action, sometimes they're not motivated to act. So that's where structure matters, because the problem usually isn't that the advisor needs more data. Most of the time they already have the data. They've got all the reports, ratios, tax returns, bank statements, finance. They already have all of that stuff. The issue is that the advisor is trying to organize all of that in real time while the client's waiting. You ever been in that moment, right? That little awkward part where you're trying to put everything together right in front of somebody. That's a tough place to be. But that's why we built the FIX framework into the Clear Path to Cash. And FIX is not meant to be, or meant to make anyway, advisory complicated. It does the opposite. It's going to give you a way to move through the conversation without trying to carry every possible issue in your head. The first step is just find the burning issue. That means you slow down long enough to ask, hey, what's really creating the pressure for this client right now? In this member situation, right, the client had several things going on at once. There were some cash concerns, right? So expenses seemed to be creeping up. The owner was worried about whether the business was going to keep, absorbing this type of pressure. It could have been really easy to talk about all of that. And we want to, right? We want to address everything that they've thrown at us. And that's usually what happens. The advisor is going to see multiple problems, and they're going to try to address multiple problems. But the conversation gets really blurry really fast when everything gets equal weight. So we narrowed it. The burning issue was really cash flow pressure. And once we had that, the next step was to identify what was causing it to drive, or what was driving it, right? So that's the I in FIX. Find the burning issue, identify what's causing it to burn. This is where a lot of advisors, they like to jump too fast. They identify the issue and immediately start giving ideas. But if you haven't confirmed the fuel source, you might be solving the wrong problem. So we use the Clear Path to Cash tools just to look a little bit deeper. And in this case, it was receivables that stood out. The client wasn't just tight on cash. Cash was getting stuck because the collections had slowed way, way, way down, right? So that changes the conversation. We're not just talking about, general terms about cash flow. There's 250 or 60 or whatever, however many ways to improve cash flow. We're talking about something that's very specific, that is the source of the pressure. And then we move to execution, right? The X in FIX. The action was simple. You just follow up on the largest overdue invoices this week, and we're going to track the dollars we can recover. And that gave the client something very specific to do. Not a whole list, not 25 different things, just one thing. Do this. And it also gave the advisor a way to follow up without guessing, right? That's what structure does. It helps you move from I see the problem to here's the next move. And that's the parts that clients remember. They might appreciate the explanation. They might like the report. Heck, they might even say this is the best meeting I ever had. But what the client really needs is to change the relationship. And when they leave, they know what to do next. That's why the framework matters, right? Find the issue, identify what's driving it, and execute the next step. This is the flow behind the app. And when you use it, the app stops being a collection of tools and starts becoming a decision system. That's the whole piece. That's the piece that a lot of advisors are missing during the busy season. And, they're not short on effort or knowledge. What they're trying to do is advisory work without structure that could hold the conversation just a little bit longer and a little bit more focused. If that sounds familiar, if that was you, I'm going to encourage you to walk through this demo and pay attention to how my system thinks, right? So take a look at it, explore the free demo. Don't just look at it at what the app does, because it's going to do a lot of things. Just don't look at just all the math and the calculations and the charts and all that. Try to really understand how it moves from the client situation, from the issue to the issue, or to the source of the issue, to the source of the next step. I want you to follow the steps, finding the issue, identifying what's causing it to be a problem, and executing at that part. That's the difference. It's not more data, it's structured thinking. And if you've ever felt that moment where it's scattered, where it's cloudy, where it's, you don't know what to do next, hey, we know that one. And ClearPath to Cash, it was built for that moment.
The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.